All right, I just activated recording. Again, welcome to the Chancellor's Day Professional Learning. So glad you're here and could make the pivot with us to the remote format. My name's Thad Copeland, Deputy Director of Sustainability. And so our agenda, as you know, this was originally a full day platform. We were supposed to be held at Teachers College. So we made the quick decision last night to come to this format, which I believe we're still going to be able to get a lot of good, meaningful content out of this. So right now we're doing welcome and intro. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what's happening at Climate Ed more broadly at DOE, within our agency, within our city, and the work of this leadership team. And then we're going to break out into 2 workshop sessions. So at the end of this time, you'll get a little overview of what those workshops are. There are 4 workshops being offered, and you'll be able to choose the 2 that you want to attend. It is important, if you would like to get the CTLE sign-in, the credit for this, you can get up to 2 hours for being in attendance today. You can either go to this URL, tinyurl.com/SUST sign-in, or if you have a mobile device and want to do this QR code, either one will take you to that form. Just sign in, and at the end of the final workshop today, you will be able to also sign out, which is equally important for this process. So again, please do this right now if you want to get that credit, and it's up to 2 hours. If you leave early, you'll just earn the credit for the amount of time that you were here. And then also, if you haven't or are unfamiliar with this in Zoom, we'd encourage you to please change your name on the screen so we can see actually who's here. It's really important to us also as we try to rectify registration process. Okay. I'm going to move forward to the content as to why you're all here. So with that, well, I've already introduced myself. I'm also joined by our director, Meredith McDermott. She's going to speak in a moment, but what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Erin, who will introduce our climate education leadership team.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Erin Laraway. I am the co-chairperson for the climate education leadership team, one of the co-chairpersons. Also, we have Colby Zentner, the chairperson for our climate education leadership team, and Sarah Slack, the co-chairperson. You guys want to say hello?
Hello, everyone.
So today's workshop facilitators. So we have accessing and sharing climate resources. So with that, we have Kaylin Fox presenting. She's a teacher at the Urban Assembly School for Green Careers. And we also have Shakira Provasoli, who is a teacher at PS 333, the Manhattan School for Children.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for making the pivot. We're going to be exploring our digest that we've been sending out since February to sustainability coordinators across the city. So we're going to have some time for you guys to explore what we have there. And then we're going to have a pseudo hands-on activity. Since we're not in person, we're going to try to shift and make it happen at home. So we're hoping to see you guys there.
Great, thank you. Okay, the other workshops, we have climate education advocacy. The presenters will be Jackie Davis, who is the coordinator of student affairs at the Marie Curie School for Medicine and Nursing. We also have Kristen Bucafola, who is a teacher at the Central Park East High School, and Jonathan Schulman, who is a teacher at PS 110.
Yay, we'll also be joined by, yes, oh good, you have a second slide of us.
Yes, so, sorry. So we also have Deborah Reach and Lynn Tide. Deborah is a teacher at the Worldview High School, and Lynn is a teacher at Columbia Secondary School.
This team is so awesome, we can't be contained on one slide. I hope you'll check out the advocacy workshop. We're going to be talking about how to get the things that you need to make the changes that you are seeking in the world for your climate education goals. So we've got some great samples. We've got some strategies to try out. We've just got it all. We hope that you'll join us.
All right, thank you. So for easy entryways for climate education, we have our wonderful chairperson, Colby Zentner, presenting, and we have Lena Constantino. Lena is a, oh, did I miss? No. Lena is a teacher at CSI High School for International Studies.
Hello again, everybody. We are going to be talking about some easy, low barrier entryways into getting climate education in your classroom, specifically looking at how to scaffold data and text to integrate climate education in your classroom. Looking forward to seeing y'all.
Okay, and finally, we have a workshop for planning and implementing a climate action day. So your presenters will be Adam Zaid. Adam is a teacher at the Queen's School of Inquiry, and Katie McCarthy, who's a teacher at Sunset Park High School.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I love the energy in the chat, and this is like a dream coming true for us climate education leadership team. In our workshop, what we're going to get is the mayor in the Plan NYC that he just released this year has already decreed that next year all schools are going to be having a climate action day. So we have together for you tons of really clear resources to get you and your school on whatever fits for your school going on your climate action day. And so that you'll be thinking about it or even ready to go as a result of coming to our workshop. So please come or watch the video after. Great to see all of you. And ignore my picture.
All right, with that, we're going to turn it over to Sarah Slack, another climate education leadership team co-chair, who will talk to us a little bit about the work of this group and how you can get involved.
Thanks, Thad, and thanks everybody for being here. I've been part of the climate education leadership team since it formed. We have been working on trying to identify how climate education connects to the learning your students are already doing in the classroom, but also how it can expand their understanding of the world around them. We are really excited about Plan NYC. You're going to be hearing a lot about that because it gives us a structure for encouraging more teachers to incorporate climate education resources into classes, not just science, not just math, but into the humanities, into all subjects at school. We're trying to develop our network of peer advisors, people who can support teachers who are new to climate education and find ways that we can support them with resources, with just understanding the basics of the subject, and with how to incorporate it into their classrooms. And then we are finding ways and times to offer climate education professional learning opportunities for teachers throughout the DOE. We have so far really increased the number of people who are actively working to advocate for improved climate education in the schools. Part of that was an Urban Heat Island workshop series that we offered for both middle and high school teachers, and then a second session for elementary school teachers that provided extensive resources and curriculum that teachers could use in their classrooms to talk about climate education and get their students involved in investigating climate impacts in their neighborhood. We have these PDs that we're offering on Chancellor's Day. There have been other PDs offered throughout the year. And then we're also reaching out to assistant principals, to your supervisors, asking them to provide time and space for teachers to educate students about climate change and its impacts on New York City. We've provided office hours for sustainability coordinators, one of which is stationed at every school in the DOE. And then we're working to develop outstanding climate education curriculum and resources that any grade, any subject, any type of school teachers could use in their classrooms. And if you're interested in learning more about the work that we're doing or actively getting involved in the work that we're doing, we are looking for more members to join the climate education leadership team next year. There is currently a per session opening. You need to apply by June 30th in order to be considered to join the team starting in September. The link is here, bit.ly/CELT Fall 2023, and Pat has copied the real link into the chat. So if you're interested, click on that link now, write down this bit.ly link so that you can remember to come back to it in the future. We'd love to expand the number of teachers who are involved in the leadership team, who are pushing change in their communities amongst their colleagues to do more climate education in their schools. And now I'd like to turn it over to, oh no, I've got one more
One
slide.
more. Yep.
Because it makes a difference, everybody. This shows, based on Project Drawdown, has estimated the difference it can make if students in the middle and high school, this is looking at, actually it might just be high school, doesn't matter, it makes a difference. If we are educating our students about what climate change, what the effects of climate change are going to be on their communities and what they can do to make a difference to reduce carbon outputs, it has as big of an impact as stopping the rates of deforestation, almost as much as incorporating rooftop solar worldwide. So our actions as teachers reaching out to students in the United States can have a huge impact on future carbon outputs of those students. So it's really important, this work that we're doing at every level, at engaging our students, at engaging our colleagues in reducing carbon outputs and improving resilience in the face of a changing climate. Now it's Meredith's turn. Meredith.
Hey everybody, thank you Sarah, thanks everybody. I'm Meredith McDermott, I'm the Director of Energy and Sustainability for the DOE, and we were supposed to be in person. We didn't want to not have this event because we're ending a school year and we're about to move into another big one, especially for climate action and climate education, as you are now hearing. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, we're excited to have you. If you're here to learn more about how you can engage, you've come to the right place. So I just wanted to quickly, I thought, here we are sitting, working remotely, all of us today, by surprise. That came yesterday with our poor neighbors in Canada. And I thought it was pretty important that the Chancellor himself said in an email to all staff last night, I'm just going to read this first sentence. This emergency is made worse by the effects of climate change, and the work you do every day prepares our young people to be the force for change that our city, nation, and planet need. So the troops are rallying around this topic. Momentum is increasing. We've come a long way in the last few years, much of it driven by this climate ed leadership team that's going to be facilitating these great workshops for you today and moving into the future. One of the big milestones that was achieved that this team helped to really drive is very significant. For the first time ever, climate education was formally incorporated into New York City's climate and sustainability plan. Typically, it's all energy reduction, emissions reduction focused. It's all of those things. It never really includes any mention of education. We really wanted to change that in order to have this platform that some of my colleagues have already discussed today. So you can read here. So Plan NYC, it now mentions climate education formally in this plan. So training programs, you've heard a little bit about this just from Sarah. There are also going to be some more workforce development, or what we call career connected learning programs that are going to be kind of popping up for green economy, quote unquote, green economy jobs. So we know that the time is now for our young people to prepare themselves for a sort of modernizing workforce. And many of these jobs and career opportunities in the future are going to be housed within this space. So not only is it important for teachers to feel prepared to integrate these topics into their curriculum, but it's also important for students themselves to have a place to engage starting from an early age. Some of the things on the docket for next year as formally landed in Plan NYC. Adam and Katie, you heard about that. They're going to be doing a workshop on how to get started thinking about these climate action days. These are days that we are going to ask every single public school to participate and engage in. Want to try to make it easy, curate some resources, activities, materials, partner organization resources, so that schools, even if you don't have a robust history of engagement in sustainability or climate programs or action, we want every school to find a place to participate. whether it's an activity or doing a full day classroom or climate teach-in. You can kind of take your pick. We just want schools to get started in a way that is attainable and has high impact. We're also going to be hosting a Climate Education Institute. It will likely be held around midwinter break next year, so stay tuned for more details. This will be a more intensive training from teachers, school-based staff from across the city. There will be a lot of different neat features and partners and colleagues and teachers like you who will be facilitating great things on different topics. So again, stay tuned for all these details. You might have heard or seen something about this certification for climate education. Please note that what we're really thinking about is how we can better align all of the things. You guys are all here today. How can we have this start contributing towards a more like formal kind of recognition program that really is showcasing school-based champions and efforts so that they're all kind of aligning back towards this goal for climate action. So again, stay tuned, but this is a really big deal and we're at the precipice of some transformative change. And it's thanks in large part to all of you here today. So thank you all.
Thanks, Meredith. Really excited. And another thing, just to keep the momentum going, we're not done with this school year yet. We have today, we have June 22nd. So any of you that are high school teachers or working with 8th graders that will be high schooler students next year, please invite them to this. This is our first ever Youth Climate Career Expo. It's going to be held in person at the High School for Climate Justice on June 22nd, 2 to 5 p.m. We have about 24 organizations that will be there. In addition, we have youth-led workshops. This was the idea and really the initiative of our Youth Leadership Council, which is a group of 30 high school students we meet with monthly. They've really felt strongly about doing an event like this, so our office has been working with them to make that happen. So again, please promote this directly. Students can register themselves. You don't have to register your students. We want to see as many people come as we can. It's come and go, 2 to 5 p.m. Come and let's start making more green careers happen. And then Pat, if you're online, I'll let you talk about this since you were the person that organized all of the drop and swaps.
Great, thanks, Thad. So we know that the end of the year is going to be a wasteful time of year with classrooms getting cleaned up, custodians throwing things away. So last year we piloted a program. We partnered with Materials for the Arts, who is a creative reuse center. They're a great nonprofit. They offer free arts materials to educators and other nonprofits. So we work with them to have host sites where educators can come and drop off classroom materials, but also shop anything that's there. So this year we wanted to expand upon it. So in some boroughs we have more than one location, and really hoping that you can make it to one of these. We realize these are during the workday, so it's kind of hard for people to make it. But we're really encouraging folks to tap into their parent coordinator community. So maybe if you can't make it, you have a colleague who has a free period or a parent at the school who could drop materials off at the swaps. So highly encourage you to check that out. I'm going to put a link in the chat. We've got them all throughout June, so hope to see you there.
Okay, Colby, I'll let you conclude us and dismiss us to workshops.
Awesome. So now we are going to start moving over to our individual workshops. So we're going to leave this main session and each individual workshop will have their own links. You are now going to go to the Zoom sessions for your first workshop. These will last until, we're starting a little bit late, but we'll keep it on schedule. These will last until 1:35. At the end of your first workshop, your presenters will repost the Zoom link and you all will have access to select your second workshop, and that will close out our session today. So again, concluding this meeting, you'll find your link where to go for your first workshop, and we'll be sure to repost those after the end of your first workshop to be able to move on to your second workshop. Again, thank you so much for being here with us today and pivoting to this remote edition. So happy to have you all and hope you all pick up some great resources and learning through these sessions. Thank you so much.
We will get started. So we're here today. My name is Lena Costantino. I'm a teacher and a UFT Teacher Center coach at New Dorp High School in Staten Island.
And I am Colby Zenner. I am a teacher at the High School of Economics and Finance in Financial District and the chair of the New York City Climate Education Leadership Team.
And so today, here, just giving you a brief overview of our agenda. We're going to talk about data as an entry point to climate education and what data literacy is, why it's important, and some classroom strategies for teaching climate data. And in order to make our text accessible to all of our students, what are some scaffolds that we can use so that this information is accessible to all of our students, our students with disabilities, our Ls, our young students, our high school students, and talk about those in more detail. We'll be sharing a ton of resources with you that will be sent to you in an email with links to everything that we've talked about, all documents at the end of today's presentation. And then hopefully we'll have some time also for questions and feedback.
Awesome. So we're going to be using these two lenses of data and text as an easy kind of entryway to teaching climate in your classrooms. It's not always easy or even an option that teachers can do a whole unit dedicated to climate change, which would be the ideal, right? I'd love for all of you to go out there and teach these big, beefy units on climate education. We know with our backdrop of what's going on today, right, that not enough action is happening. And so educating our students to be climate informed individuals as they go and become voters and change makers in our society is so incredibly important. But that's okay. Even if you can't do an entire unit, an entire lesson on climate ed, just incorporating climate change in the way that you can, that works with your students in your classrooms, is important and meaningful. I love that slide that was shown in our intro session today that shows that teaching climate education is just as important in reducing carbon emissions as some really major changes that you can make on an individual and a societal level. So the work that you guys do, any type of incorporation of this stuff in your classrooms is super important. And what better way to do that than through the lens of tools that are really essential for the 21st century and the world that we're entering. So data literacy is really important as we enter the data world, right? We are inundated with enormous amounts of data. We have things like AI and ChatGPT, and really school is often this kind of giant behemoth that doesn't change to adapt our times as quickly as we would like. So I think it's important as teachers to try to adapt our classrooms as best as we can to meet the needs of today. And one of those would be making sure that our students are able to understand these vast amounts of data that we're going to be encountering in the world. And so encouraging this idea of data literacy, which is the ability to read, write, and communicate about data. And those are kind of the three main components that we have here. And in the next slide, we'll dig a little bit deeper. And we can see that all of these have their own challenges, right? Even in terms of location, finding relevant pieces of data. In the past, Google used to be a pretty great tool, right? You would know, oh, at least the first page, that's going to be pretty relevant links, right? If you get to like pages 3, 4, you might want to look at it a little bit deeper. But nowadays, the first page is all kinds of ads, and we really have to kind of use that discerning lens from the get-go to make sure that we're looking at relevant materials. Then we get into understanding the data that we're looking at, interpreting it. What does this mean? Why does this matter? Analyzing it. What questions now surge? Where do we go from here? Integrating it with the content we've learned in our classrooms, collaborating. It should always be about working together, sharing this, and that leads to our communication, right? We don't just want to teach our students about data, teach our students about climate change. We want them to be able to be change makers who can then teach others and keep this cycle going. And again, this is not just important for climate ed. This is not just important for them to be data literate just in as a skill, but it's important in terms of our democracy, in terms of living in this world of fake news and misinformation, right? To be a discerning citizen, to know how to interpret, again, the plethora of data and information that we have surrounding us so that they can't get tricked by companies or politicians who try to misuse data or misinterpret data in order to get someone's vote or someone's money or something like that. And we know that data affects our healthcare decisions, it affects our financial decisions. So giving students these tools really allows them to manage their lives better and to be in charge. And on top of that, on top of personal decisions, it's also super important in the workforce. So people in the workforce say that nowadays they have to interact with data in all kinds of ways in terms of data collection, management, analysis, using data-driven decision-making. All of these are super important in our 21st century economy. Next slide, please. And if you don't get it in education, which this graph on the bottom shows, right, most of these people who were surveyed, and all my links are always in these slide notes for all the slides, so you can find the original sources for all this stuff there. 42%, the first time we learned about how to use data was on the job, right? Only 15% was in high school. So we were really trying to increase those levels so that once we get to college, maybe we're going to take some data science class, we've already seen the pieces. We've already been introduced to these topics through elementary school, middle school, high school, and then we don't have to be those 54% of employees who want to improve their data skills, who have to take courses that cost hundreds of dollars. We can already have those foundational points through teaching them in our K-12 education. And I also just love this lens of looking at data, kind of connecting with education as a cyclical thing, right? We're always trying to approximate getting closer to our solution, right? It's not about just finishing high school, just finishing college. No, we want to be lifelong learners. We want to always be trying to improve ourselves, improving our learning. And so I love looking at the data cycle, right? We start by asking questions, maybe about climate change, right? Are we going to hit the 1.5? Are we going to hit 2? How long is it going to take to get there to that level of warming? So we ask those questions, we have to look at data to get the answers. We analyze the data. What does this tell us? Interpret the data. And that's probably not going to give us the answer, right? But it's going to get us closer. It's going to give us another set of questions, and that'll get us a little bit closer to where we want to go. So it's really this cyclical process that I think is really important to understand in the learning cycle.
Unmuted. Now we're going to go through some resources and strategies, and we've kind of differentiated them or scaffolded them for you as well into two kind of buckets, right? The data curious and the data connoisseur. So that some low level strategies that can be used and some higher level ones that can be used with maybe a more advanced class. And so the first strategy that we'll talk about is the I-squared strategy, which is from biological sciences. And it basically gives students the tools that they need to take a graph, a scientific figure from a paper, a political cartoon, a map, any kind of diagram that they're going to see in a textbook or any kind of text that. And they're going to use the strategy where they first identify what they see, right, by labeling it just in plain observative what I see statements. And then in the second phase, interpreting each of their what I saw statements with a what I mean statements. Then using that summarizing skill that's ever so important, right? Putting that thing into their own words, combine those observations and inferences to create a caption that summarizes the graph. So that looking at an example of how this can be done, right, with an example of annual temperatures, the first step is just what do I see, right? And again, this is the easiest, most accessible piece. Students can do this. It's not, there's no analysis, there's no interpretation. It's just, what do I see? Well, I see the highest dot is in July, right? I see that it's going up from February to July and it's going down from August to December. And that's just what we're doing here with our what I see statements. We're not explaining anything. We're not trying to find any meaning. We're just saying, this is what I see. Based on what the student saw, then each of those what I see statements should have a then follow up of what does it mean? Right. So if I see this upward slope, well, what does that mean? Well, it means the average temperature is increasing in the city from February to July. Again, we're not doing interpretation here. We're not doing analysis, right? We're just kind of explaining each of the things that we saw inside of this graph. And then in the third step right here in this caption, this tell a story piece, we're taking each of those bullets, each of those things that they saw and explain what they meant and putting them kind of together in one concise, coherent paragraph. Right? So that showing, you know, this is what I saw, this is what it means. And when you do that for 3 or 4 points of a graph or a figure or a table or whatever it is, you now have a caption, right, that can accompany your figure. And that when this is done in the classroom, this can be done with everybody looking at the same chart or graph, and or this could be done with students jigsawing this activity. And maybe people are doing 10 different cities in the classroom. Maybe they're looking at the same city over different numbers of years to see, are there patterns? Do things change? Do highs get higher and lows get lower? So that there's a lot of different ways to kind of put that data in the classroom and put it in the hands of the students, so that they're the ones doing the interpretation, right? You're not telling them what it means. You're giving them the space and the time to ask those questions and to make their own analysis, right? And make their own conclusions about the data. This is what we want students to develop, is those skills of analysis, right? Those skills of analysis are really hard. Those are what personally my students struggle with the most. They can summarize no problem, right? When it comes down to like, well, why did this happen? Or what does it mean if this happens? Or what happens if this happens, right? Cause and effect. These are the places where students struggle, and we need to give them the practice so that they can become better critical thinkers. Another way that data can be used in the classroom, right, and gives students the space to grapple with this internally, right, and to struggle with it, is data talks, right? And this is a space for students to interpret a variety of data representations in a low-stake exploratory environment. It's just basically, what do you notice? What do you wonder? What's going on here? And a data talk has a whole bunch of lessons and resources that you can access around climate change and other pieces of data, so that giving students that time to talk about it and to discuss it in their small groups and allow them to generate those questions, right? What are you wondering by looking at this? And when we're looking at teacher evaluations and we're looking at that highly effective realm, this is where we want students to be, right? We want students to be generating the questions, right? What are they wondering about by looking at this piece of information? How can we scratch a little bit beyond the surface to get them thinking deeply about information that we're presenting to them? Another great source of data for a more local is the New York Times climate change graphs. And again, what do you notice? What do you wonder? Let's talk about it in our small groups, low stakes, right? And then what story are we telling by looking at this graph? What information, right? What's happening? You know, what does it mean going forward? And again, we can look at kind of some of the examples that they are on the New York Times data set here. One of them being carbon dioxide emitted worldwide from 1850 to 2014. And there's a lot to unpack here, right? There's, you know what I mean, a huge upward slope that we can definitely see in billions of metric tons. But there's also, you know, countries on this map, and there's, you know, countries on this map that have rapidly changed their amount of carbon dioxide. So, you know, what questions students might come up with here are personal, right? And maybe aren't questions that you would have ever thought of. And those are personally what I think are the best kind of questions, right? The ones that I would never think of by looking at, but maybe a student generates by given the space to do that, right? And to have some time to think and look at a source of information. Another graph from the New York Times website here is how we generated electricity from 2001 to 2017. And again, we can see shifts in nuclear, natural gas, hydroelectric, coal. And we can talk about things that happened here, like banning fracking, closing Indian Point, right? These are like political decisions that maybe have an impact on not only where our electricity comes from, but how much our electricity costs, which is something that maybe people are realizing, right? Our electric bills are more expensive than they were 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And what's going on? Why maybe is that happening? Another resource that's really, really great for students to use is Story Maps ArcGIS. And this is really great for showing students this relationship between cause and effect, right? And allowing them to really visualize very, very nicely the impact that one thing may have on another. And what makes climate hard, right, is that it's a multivariable system. And we don't like that in science. We like there to be one variable, and we change that one variable, and then we have nice, clean results. And when we look at climate, we don't have one variable. We have thousands of variables that are constantly changing every single day, but that can mean that there's a distinct relationship between two things. So on these two maps that are overlaid here, we have the heat vulnerability index in New York City, right? Darker purple or maroon shows a higher heat vulnerability index. And then we can overlay that with story maps to show tree cover, right? Or vegetative cover. And we can see in those areas that have really lots of trees, like the Greenbelt in Staten Island, we don't have a high heat vulnerability index. But we can see where we have a high heat vulnerability index, right along here at the border of Queens and Brooklyn, we don't have very much vegetative cover, right? That vegetative cover is pretty low. So that being able to overlay these maps, and we have a whole list of resources later that we'll share with you too. New York City has a great set of these maps for things like asthma rates and particulate matter. And it's a really neat visual tool that makes it very, very clean for students to see and understand. All right, and the last one is by far the most technical one to use, so it might be most useful for your high school students, but it's really localized information. And when we talked about that variable system, this allows you to change variables. Like, what if we reduce traffic in New York City by 20%? What would that mean? And you can do this with this assessment, and you can do that by zip code, which is really minute data. And just yesterday, right, at my husband's school, which is right by the Bayonne Bridge over here in Staten Island, their air quality index yesterday was 636. And at my school, which is down here on closer to the water, we didn't get higher than about 450, maybe 400 by the end of the day. So just by like 3 or 4 miles as the crow flies, there is a tremendous difference in air quality. And looking at like, what does it mean if we change the number of bikes, right? Or we limit the number of cars or increase the amount of vegetative cover, allows you to alter those variables and prioritize them so you can see which might have the best impact or mitigation in terms of, reducing climate impact.
And so here are a bunch of resources that we have compiled where you can access some of these climate data sets, and you can use some of these I-squared protocols, these what do you see, what do you wonder, what's going on. So the first three, the New York City Environment and Health Data Portal, like Lena said, this has some fantastic data on asthma rates, comparing it to tree cover, all these different variables that you can have your students look at and try to kind of find these cause and effect relationships. The New York City Climate Dashboard is put on by the Office of the Comptroller. Incredible climate data there, super accessible to your students. Another favorite is Surging Seas Risk Finder. That one allows you to play with what areas of the city are going to be most impacted by rising waters. If the sea level rises by 2 inches, what's going to happen? 3 inches, and you can see the areas of the city that will be the first ones, the most vulnerable to that flood risk. Finally, Lena, if you'll click into the local data sets, even more than just these three, we have a shared Google Doc of a bunch of different local data sets from New York and New York City related data. And they have little descriptions. You can pop onto these websites, tons of resources that you can use and analyze with your students. And then the second one on this document is same dealio, except for that's national and global data. So there's stuff from NASA, there's stuff from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, some awesome graphics out there that, again, you can use these protocols with and access those with your students. I think we skipped ahead a couple. One more back.
My computer was freezing.
You're totally good. All right. So maybe you're one of those teachers who's like, oh my gosh, data literacy, data science, this is the next big thing. I gotta teach it to my students. So we have some super easily accessible resources that can allow you to turnkey this stuff into your classrooms right now. So this is a super cool program. It's called UCubed. It's a partnership between Stanford University and Google. And I love to really go off on some of these free educational resources. We encounter way too much stuff that's behind a paywall as educators. So I love to lift up the awesome free resources. So UCubed has kind of these two little programs that I'll share with y'all. One of these is the data science big ideas. So it focuses us on these 4 main big ideas, and it has materials from grades K to 10. If you go to the next slide, these 4 big ideas are then broken down into standards. So we can start to break down these big ideas into bite-sized pieces that we can then teach to our students. And the next slide will show each of these grade bands also has specific tasks. And as Lena taught you guys earlier, some of these data talk activities that can help you work on achieving some of these standards to achieve those big ideas. And next slide. In addition to those big ideas, those standards, they also have some just ready to go turnkeyable lessons. These ones are for the upper grade band. So this is for middle school and high school, but there's 8 incredible lessons about data science intro, ending with a culminating project after doing 5 units. So this would be a couple weeks in your class maybe, but my favorite part of this, if you go to the next slide, Lena, is that it's totally piecemeal, right? You use what works for your classroom. Again, not all of us have time to do these big beefy units, but we definitely all have time to do a data talk, right? We all have time to look at a climate change graph as an opener or something like that to get our students thinking about some of these topics. So fantastic resource there. And now we're going to shift gears a little bit. So we started talking about how to use data as an entryway to get climate education into the classroom. And now we're going to move and talk about how we can use text and analysis of text to get climate education into our classrooms. And again, as with data, we want to kind of add this lens of criticality, right? We don't just want to create readers, that's super important, but we want to create critical readers that are thinking just beyond what the text says, right? Going deeper, reading between the lines. If you can go to the next slide for me, please. And right, some of these analysis points that we want to make sure our students are asking questions, right? We should be interacting with the text. It's not just us reading the text. We're interacting back with the text. We're asking questions, right? Maybe we're thinking about the author. Who wrote this? What's their expertise? What's their background? The purpose of the piece? Why is this piece written? Is this supposed to get me to feel a certain way, to do a certain something? What's it trying to accomplish? Thinking about the audience, who are the intended readers of this piece? And potential bias, right? What potential bias might this piece have or might this author have? And so just a little quick way to look at this, I took a couple of clips of screenshots from some of our favorite multinational corporations out there. We have Shell on the left-hand side and Coca-Cola on the right-hand side. And these are just some of the text on their climate sustainability pages. So Shell says, our climate target, Shell's target is to become a net zero emissions energy business by 2050. And Coca-Cola says we're going to reduce our absolute greenhouse gas emissions by 25% by 2030. There are science-based targets. We love science-based, right? So some of this stuff sounds great, but we got to do a little layer of analysis, right? So what are they trying to tell us here? Who's behind this stuff? What's the purpose here? And so if we dig a little bit deeper into the data, and I linked this on the slide, we can see that Coca-Cola actually has been making these pledges for decades and has not met a single one of the pledges that they've made, right? So this is just empty words, but we want to be critical readers to go able to be beyond that. For example, in 1990, Coca-Cola said they had a goal to make sure that of their plastic bottles, 25% of that plastic would be recycled. We are 3 decades after 1990, and that number is only at 10% today, even in this climate crisis that we have. And Coca-Cola is the biggest plastic bottle polluter of the world. So we see that we got to do that kind of deeper layer because it sounds, these are sweet nothings, right? Sounds fantastic. We get these from corporations, we get the politicians. So we want our students to be able to discern this and have that next layer of analysis to really go beyond just these nice sounding words.
And so another way to kind of get students involved in this is using climate related current events, right? So we have, I'm sure, plenty of current events to talk about the last 2 days, right? Yesterday and today are definitely, you know, what's the word? Watermark days in terms of climate in New York City. We were the worst air quality city in the world yesterday, the whole wide world, right? No one was better than us. I guess we're first. Great. Awesome. And, you know, these are things that students will remember, right? Our high school students will remember. Not that we had a snow day this year, because we didn't. We had a fire day this year, right? You know, when there's no school tomorrow because we're remote. And using that can help connect the science they learn in the classroom to a real world application, right? And using that student interest when it's relevant to them, right? This is their life, right? Like they're the ones being affected by this, and climate change isn't this thing that's going to happen in 2030 or 2050 or 2100. It's happening now, right? In 2023. And these are, you know, things that we can't ignore anymore, right? They're here, right? We have to face them. And so a great resource for this is News ELA. And just wanted to show you this briefly because I'm not sure how many of you know that you are able to access News ELA through the Teach Hub on the New York City Schools website. Although the login that you have to use to get to this place is rather convoluted because you have to use it through Clever. So on the Teach Hub, you see this little blue C down here, which is your Clever login. Your Clever login on Teach Hub allows you to create your own page with things that you can share with other teachers, right, and other students. And there's a district page, right, where a whole bunch of resources that the district pays for you to have access for, you can access, right? These are here too. Also, there's resources by grade. These are great. They have lesson plans. They have unit plans for every subject that there are here. And these are created by the district for MELS, arts, health, everything. And who knows that all this stuff is here, but this is where it lives on Clever. And on your Clever, you can then use and link into News ELA or News Ella, however you pronounce it. I'm not sure which is correct. But what's nice about Newsela is that it allows you to search for articles, to differentiate your articles, to assign them on Google Classroom because you can link your Google Classrooms on here, right? And again, pick higher, medium, and lower level articles, and even produces some research sets for students so that they can have a set of articles to compare if you wanted them to do a research project on something. But it's a great resource. You do have access to it through the DOE, through Clever, and I'm not sure that many people actually know that. But again, what's nice too about Scaffolding as a resource on Newsela is that you can use it to tailor to students' interests. Climate change are going to make home runs easier to hit because the air is going to be warmer. So maybe we'll see more records, right, of home runs being broken in the coming years. We can talk about climate change in the Northeast because, again, we thought wildfires were a West Coast California problem, and they're not, right? They're here. And one of my students yesterday was like, "But Miss, it's going to get better." And I was like, "Yusuf, do you think it's going to get cooler and wetter in the next 2 months?" And then one of the other students was like, "Miss, I think you short circuited him," because it's like this idea of like, well, no, it's not going to get wetter and colder. It's going to get hotter and drier between July and August. This problem is probably going to get, and become a bigger issue for us here on the West Coast. So kind of leading into that about what can I do as a teenager to stop that climate change?
Yeah, and just Newsela is so great because usually when we want to differentiate text, we have to select straight up different text, right? You usually can't find one text on multiple levels, but the fact that Newsela allows you to have the same text and to scale it down to different reading levels is just really awesome to be able to differentiate for that level. And if you'll go back a few slides, I just have to make a comment on the article. 2 more back. Yeah, so that NPR article about, so climate is changing too quickly for the Sierra Nevada zombie forest. So I'm from California, I'm from the Sierra Nevadas, the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. And I just thought that this was such a poignant article, although right now we have this incredible backdrop of being remote for the air quality. But it just made me think about how if we're going to reach that 1.5 degree warming, 2.0 degrees of warming, right? We're going to start having these areas of planet Earth that are not compatible with human living and human life, right? There's going to be areas that are just too hot for people to live, on top of the fact that there's going to be island nations that are already having sea level rises that makes them also incompatible for human life. So we're already starting to see this, and kind of a harbinger for this happening on the scale of people, which we're starting to see. There's already climate migrants, and that's only going to increase as we go up in the future. But the same thing happening to people is also happening to plants. And this was a particularly sad one for me, again, because this is kind of my backyard. But now there's a huge swath of forest in California of trees basically just waiting to die because the climate has changed due to temperature change, that these trees actually can't even live there anymore. So they're going to be in a process of dying. That's going to just create more timber and more wildfires. So it really becomes a positive feedback loop in the wrong direction. So we got to make sure that we're fighting this and making sure that we don't get into those disastrous effects of climate change. All right, and back one slide for me, please. Thank you so much, Lena. So what can we do with articles beyond just reading articles, right? There's a couple of different skill sets we can practice with article reading. Summarizing, I think, is an oft overlooked skill, right? Sometimes I have to go back to that with my high school students and say, oof, we got to practice better taking out these main ideas and stating things in our own words. They love to just copy straight words. We don't want to plagiarize. We want to make sure that we're good summarizers, writing in our own words. So there's some cool protocols there that scaffold this from elementary, middle, and high school to teach summarizing. But what do we want to do with that summary, right? We don't just want a summary right to summary right. We want to be able to communicate that information, right? That communicating for the data is the important part. That's C, that communication for everything. And so how can we communicate? How can we build off of what we're learning in these articles? A good way to do a little mini activity would be have a certain climate related article. Have your students summarize that article and then use that summary to then build out an advocacy letter to connect this to civic action, right? We know that our politicians are not meeting the moment in terms of the climate crisis. So we can activate our students, get them to start flexing their civic muscles and make sure that they're going to be informed citizens by practicing that. So you can have them read article, write a letter to their city council members, their state representatives, or their federal electeds to make sure that we're moving towards the action that we need to turn to make sure that we prevent these climate crises that we're talking about. And there's a template there to be able to easily write letters with your students. Another way we can use text in our classroom to talk about climate change is one of my personal favorites in the classroom is using political cartoons. Obviously, there's political cartoons about all kinds of topics out there, but there are quite a few about the climate crisis. And I've also linked in the slide notes a database of a bunch of different political cartoons relating to climate that you could use. And it's just a good way, again, to add this level of layer of criticality in analysis. What issue is the political cartoon about? What's the cartoonist's opinions? What might other people's opinions be on this matter? Is it persuasive? What techniques could be used to make it more persuasive? And on the next couple slides, we'll see just some more protocols. I have another California-based cartoon that I found funny. Eureka! Oh my gosh, gold? No, we found water because we're in a drought in California. So that's the liquid gold that we got now. And same thing, how can we look at these cartoons through that level of criticality? This would work great for an English class, for a political science class, right? Looking at characters, symbols, objects. What do these things stand for? Irony. Clues and details give further meaning. What's the main idea here? And any bias that the cartoonist might have.
And so another really, really great resource, or hundreds of thousands of resources, is Subject to Climate, which is a database of climate education lessons and resources, which has already been vetted by educators and scientists. And what's really great about this website is that you can filter your search like when you're online shopping, so that if you need a 3rd grade lesson from ELA, you can click those buttons on Subject to Climate and it will populate with answers for you. And then you can search them by climate and weather, climate solutions, right? Human impacts, oceans, etc. And so we wanted to kind of curate a couple sets of resources. Again, for living environment and earth science teachers, it's very easy to talk about climate change because you have to, because it's in the standards. For physics and chemistry teachers, it's not, right? But there's tons of ways to connect climate education in physics. I talked about the thermal expansion of water, the physics of heat, right? The change of ice flow right after things melt and how that changes the amount of water entering our oceans. In chemistry, we can talk about clean water in sanitation, the state of the ice caps, right? How much heat causes how much ice to melt, ocean acidification, coral bleaching, the greenhouse effect, which is just chemistry, right? Why do certain molecules vibrate and create heat and other ones don't? And the gas laws of climate change, right? This idea that climate, even if gases are only produced in the United States and China, it's everybody's problem because gases have no definite volume and no definite shape. So also kind of some resources about teaching climate ed in history, about food, first foods conservation, science research. This climate atlas allows you to compare climate data across the United States over long periods of time, living in reciprocity with local waterways, right? Why this is important. The laws about how we utilize water and the rights to water on the East Coast are very different from the rights of water on the West Coast, and the historical context around that and what that means, you know what I mean, for people who live there is really, really different and important. And you know, why the US Army tried to exterminate the buffalo to build a railroad. So these are resources all from the Subject to Climate website. But again, you feel free to peruse it, search it, use it. It's really great. It's really easy to filter and to search and to find resources and lessons kind of already done that fit the need for your particular classroom.
Yeah, and truly when I give PDs like this, it's kind of my number one go-to. I adore Subject to Climate, a huge, huge resource database. They're all vetted by both climate scientists and by teachers. So you know it's relevant stuff. Sometimes you have the stuff just vetted by the climate scientists and you're like, okay, great, but this is not going to work in my classroom, right? So having that kind of dual verification of the scientists and the teachers is really fantastic. And again, by all grade level bands, all subject areas, super easy to search. I highly recommend you all visit that site. And then also same thing, it's piecemeal. It's what needs to fit your classroom. There's lesson plans to units, to just individual kind of articles or videos, media resources. So they have everything there. And here is just some further resources on data literacy, data science. And one that's actually super important that I want to show you all, specifically relating to text, is another Google Doc of climate and sustainability related text. So this is a document in progress. We're going to be adding on to this, but we have a bunch of different climate and sustainability texts that you can use in your classroom. So we have things ranging from prose to poetry to YA novels, and we have all grade levels from elementary to middle school to high school, all kinds of good stuff there that you can utilize in your classrooms. Another super important resource is our New York City Department of Education Sustainability Hub. You can find all the most up-to-date information about happenings in the Office of Sustainability. All the initiatives, trainings, PDs that will be offered are always going to be hosted on the Sustainability Hub. Another great resource for y'all to check out. And look at us, we were so on it after our truncated version for number 1. We actually have time for some questions if we have any, and then we'll get you guys your CTLE sign out. And again, you all will be emailed a copy of this recording of this presentation, so you will have all of these resources at your fingertips. Yeah, and yes, you will all go for it.
How could we, or can we somehow identify a category of information that explicitly challenges climate change, and what types of arguments need to be made to counter the counters?
Yeah, so there's actually a fantastic tool that's called Cranky Uncle that I would highly recommend. I can link it in the slide. So it's exactly that. It's like, we all have this uncle who's right, oh, but in the past, it actually used to be hotter. So you're like, no, uncle, that's just because the earth went through cycles of heating. But if you look at the warming today, it doesn't make sense. This isn't a natural cycle. And so it goes through all of the logical fallacies that you're probably going to encounter when talking about climate change, right? And so it's a really incredible game. They have website, they have mobile phone, and it's exactly this. It's how to tackle those climate change deniers, the most common falsities that people will throw at you in terms of climate change, and allows you to identify these fallacies all over the place, but also gives you tools to then combat each of these most common kind of misconceptions about climate change.
Yeah, and how about some of the climate controversies, like the climate scientists that were stretching the information and that are now used as arguments against climate change? Like in other words, as we work with the more advanced students, which would be my main interest here, how I think that it deserves a little bit of thought to figure out how to address the controversies that have shaped the history of climate change, to dispel the myths, I guess, and to really critically think about how to message information, because a lot of the information that we have here, even though basic and simple is good, with our political climate, they're very serious people who are challenging climate change at this point, even scientists. And to be able to talk about those controversies, I think for the more advanced kids would be really appropriate.
Yeah, and again, Cranky Uncle talked about the idea of the 99% of scientists, but there's the 1%. What does that mean? How do we talk about that? I'll let Lena talk about this resource, but there's another, I've given a PD on looking at individual versus collective action. And that's a big part of this issue, right? There's that famous ad that, it was Coca-Cola was actually behind it. And it was people throwing a plastic bottle, polluting. And there was like a Native American going down a river or something, and it was like, oh my gosh, don't destroy the planet, you have to recycle. And that was kind of the beginning of corporations saying this is an individual problem, right? This is humans just have to recycle. You're not doing a good enough job recycling, right? But we need our students to understand, I can recycle, I can be the best recycler, I can recycle till I'm blue in the face, separate all my waste, compost, everything. And that's not going to solve the climate crisis. So for them, even just framing the argument as an individual thing has been a huge ploy from corporations and the powers that be who don't want us to have action. So yeah, there's all kinds of layers to this, and you bring up great points. And Lena, if you want to talk about this particular resource.
Yeah, so Novel New York is our free state library service. So it allows you to access pretty much every magazine, newspaper, scientific journal that's ever been published that might be behind a paywall, and all you have to do is allow it your location. And so long as you're in New York, you have access to all of this. So the homepage of Novel New York has all of these databases, right? So again, when you're looking for those higher level papers of maybe those things that have been discredited in the past, like I think it's useful to have students look at those abstracts and look at those papers, right? And look at, you know what I mean? Like where are methods maybe not the best, right? Or maybe are data points not being used in the best way possible. And I think actually, you know, showing them those resources, like primary sources, is the best way to kind of attack that. And those can be accessed through here, the Gale Academic One file. This also allows you to kind of like, they have one for elementary and middle school. So they'll kind of have sources that are more fit to the reading levels. But a great resource that I like here is Opposing Viewpoints. And in this Opposing Viewpoints database, it allows you to kind of like have, or it sorts articles for you in the pro and the con, right? So whatever it is, if you put in climate change, genetic engineering, stem cell research, whatever, it sorts these resources and it tells you, you know what I mean, the content level. But inside of the resource here, it'll also kind of tell you about the organization, the introduction, and it allows students to look at viewpoints from two lenses, right? It'll sort those for you. And this I found very, very useful in my human genetics course for having students find articles for and against certain things, and it helps them limit those it sorts them for them so they don't have to spend the time kind of like examining the bias of the article. But I think, you know, teaching students how to, one, interact with a scientific article is really important. Two, explaining the process of peer review and who and what and how gets published and what scientific publications is also really important. And you know what I mean, that context, right, of how does a paper get published, or why does something get into Science or Nature, right? Or, you know, the Journal of Geosciences. You know, these are important things for students to kind of understand of like what gets picked up by the New York Times and then becomes part of the zeitgeist, and what actually might be better science and is never read by anybody because it was published in the Journal of Microbiology. You know, so that impact score of a journal is another piece that, like, again, is important to bring to students because they don't know that, right? And they don't know that until they interact with that information. But Novel New York is another tremendous, tremendous resource. I can't recommend it enough for getting students to look at peer-reviewed sources, right? And have that kind of, that first source of like eliminating the Google ad nonsense done for them.
And thank you for that question. We'll add a slide and we'll link these into the presentation so everyone can have access to these resources.
Yeah, did you say that we have access to this through our DOE accounts?
No, this Novel New York, you have access. All you have to do, you see how it says I'm authenticated. All you have to do is allow it your location. Once you allow it to access your location, you pay taxes for this. You live in New York, anywhere in the state, you have access to this. Yeah. You can access all your New York Times articles for free too. So you don't have to worry about the paywall.
Good stuff. Any other questions?
I have a logistical question. Do we need to sign out, like send in the beginning, it was everything moved really quickly. I don't know if we have to sign out again.
There's two steps we would like you to do if possible. So number one is going to be our feedback form. We would love for you to give feedback on both of the sessions you attend. You'll be able to do that in just one feedback form that we're going to post in the chat. And then secondly, yes, in order to get those CTLE credits, you should have signed in at the beginning, and now you're going to do the sign out form to get those CTLE credits, and we'll also post that in the chat for you all.
Is it the same link as the sign in?
No, it's the tinyurl.com/sign out CTLE. So there's a specific sign out form.
Oh, got it. Thanks.